Tonight, out with the old and in with the slightly older? Also tonight, 6 episodes in and I think we finally figured out what this show is about. Why am I doing C-3PO? And also tonight, whenever I get angry I go for a drive and I've been really putting on the miles lately. What? Fine. Kilometers! I've been really packing on the kilometers! Ugh, that makes me sound fat. Ugh. Also tonight, it's not all repeating bits. Like Trudeau Sr., I went for a walk in the snow and we'll wrap up this episode with me sharing my thoughts. You probably clicked this. 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 You probably clicked this looking for a bear crapping in the woods, but instead you've landed on the Cold Bear Report.
Nation, based on some of the feedback I've been getting, I feel like I need to clarify a few things, and after a bit of thought I realized that meant we needed a mission statement, and there's no better way to communicate that crap than with another installment of Bird. And tonight's bird is parrot. There's a perception out there that I'm a liberal, or at the very least anti-conservative. Now, it's true you won't hear a lot of slamming of the federal government on this show, and that's not because I'm getting a Canada Arts Grant, which I stress I am not. The focus of this show is threefold. Firstly, if the comment isn't funny or the phrase isn't interesting, then it doesn't belong here, period. Item B, if it isn't new, and I don't mean news, but new, then you won't find it here. And I don't do a lot of Trudeau bashing because there's no shortage of that everywhere else. It's literally an industry. And unlike that industry, I won't repeat idiotic claims made by colluding opposition parties twisting their base for more cash. Or parties that only win seats when liberal voters don't vote liberal. Because that's a made-in-Canada form of voter suppression, and I have no taste for it. So if clickbait media is running with an NDP or conservative attack, like a Harlem Globetrotter guest starring on a Gilligan's Island episode, well, you won't hear it here. And if the RCMP doesn't bother even opening a file on it, that's because it's a nothing burger. And if you really believe an internationally recognized nonprofit youth charity that members of every party envied appearing with was a scam, then you need to take a closer look at youth co-op placements by major corporations. And finally, 3. There has to be an aha moment in it for me. Insight, novelty, a take I'm not hearing at least a dozen other places. And I guarantee you, some Trudeau bashing is coming up. But when I do it, that'll be well-researched, insightful, and most importantly, something no one else is talking about. Or in other words, not the sort of thing you'd expect from a parrot. And that's tonight's bird.
China has been witness to the greatest surge in general prosperity in the history of mankind. More than 400 million people have been lifted out of poverty.
Their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted.
I found it a bit silly for Justin Trudeau to say that what he admired the most was a dictatorship, frankly. I've always been rather fond of democracy.
The point I made
was that despite all of our freedoms and our extraordinary system of government and democracy, we are up against countries that play by different rules that we would never accept, but that find themselves able to address big issues quickly and completely. Import more steel than the Americans import. We have a significant trade surplus. The Americans have a significant trade surplus with us on steel.
We go to the same church? Cool. You're in my tribe. You speak my language? You're in my tribe. You're an NYU alumni? You're in my tribe. You play Pokemon Go? You're a vegetarian. You like the Yankees. You go to the gun range. Tribe, tribe, tribe. Diversity includes political and cultural diversity. You are part of my tribe, and they are not. See, it's far too easy with social media shaping our interactions to engage only with people with whom we already agree, members of our tribe.
There is nothing partisan about this. It was the Prime Minister's trip that turned into a disaster. It was the Prime Minister's office who mishandled the invitation that went out to a convicted attempted murder.
I don't envy anyone in any level of government right now. You know it's bad when power-hungry political parties avoid forcing an election simply because anyone in charge of the supply chain for this vaccine would be holding a very angry tiger by the tail. Particularly since the best place to be right now is on the opposite bench pointing fingers. And they know it. The news is awash in how the premiers don't want Ottawa to invoke national emergency measures, but I've yet to find any information on whether Canadians want the feds to take over or not. Where's that poll? Not that Ottawa needs to invoke emergency measures to fix this mess. It could use the 1996 Department of Health Act, which allows for immediate action to deal with significant risk, direct or indirect, to health. With that, the feds could set a coordinated, nationwide, national standard response to this pandemic. Standards of what's open, what can open, how the vaccine would be distributed, all of it. So why haven't they? I hope I'm wrong, but I suspect it's politics. Lots of 30 zone. There's a lot of evidence that Justin beating on the Doug Ford drum at every opportunity in the last election kept Lion Andy Scheer out of the Prime Minister's office. I hate stop signs. Of course, the premiers don't want Ottawa in charge of that. The moment Ottawa takes over treating the pandemic, the provinces lose control of their budgets. I was worried that was a cop car, but it isn't. And for conservative provinces, that means spending money on something other than oil and gas and tax breaks for the rich. Stop sign. Ooh, starting in second, that's always risky. The last thing Doug Ford wants is Ottawa telling him he has to invest in schools to make them safe or regulate long-term care facilities that people like former Premier and Ford-nominated Order of Canada recipient Mike Harris are getting rich off of. So even though Ottawa has given them billions to spend on this pandemic, most of which remains untouched, every single province will attack Trudeau as if the emergency order were permanent. So yeah, Justin taking over this mess is risky. He becomes the single point of failure in fighting this pandemic. But that's leadership. Instead, I suspect the federal Liberals are playing the jurisdiction card because they're secretly hoping to paint the federal Conservatives with the brush of failure in Ontario, Alberta, Quebec, and anywhere else non-Liberal governments are continuing to screw the pooch on this pandemic. It's the old give provincial Conservatives the brush to paint their federal kin with in the next election, and I get that too. Because we don't have to imagine how bad things would have been in this pandemic if Andrew Scheer had been Prime Minister. We just need to look south
And I get that modern politics are a blood sport. The Reform Party stoked the populist fires in the 90s, brought American-style slam politics into Canada with a vengeance, and have been on the gravy train of hate politic fundraising ever since. I'm behind a bus now. If the focus on the next federal election is how badly Doug Ford and Jason Kenney handled this pandemic, then I'm sorry, Justin doesn't deserve to win. Because at any point he had the power to take the ball out of their hands, and he didn't. That's a choice. And if he tries to play that game in the next election, then we'll have one too. And that's my road rage! Yeah! Ah! DisplayPort cables provided by Cheap-Ass Cables R Us for when you don't mind it taking days for delivery of something that'll snap at the slightest touch, you know? True story. Not a sponsor. Thankfully. Mer. Anybody says that's still a bit of a climb. All right. Hi. Now I won't lie. Trudeau is a smug little bastard, but the synonym for that is millennial. And you know I'm right. His resting bitch face would make the perfect meme for okay boomer. And he tosses that look out a lot. But there's something very disturbing about conservatives attacking him for being a former teacher and then coming at him for inheriting wealth. For one, why do conservatives hate teachers so much? And they do. There's no group on this planet that conservatives seem to have a bigger problem with. They cut school budgets like someone's still harboring resentment over a grade 8 math quiz they failed. And it's particularly annoying when the conservatives mocking Trudeau for having real-world jobs are people like multimillionaire and man who has never worked a real job, but somehow has qualified for a gold-plated pension before he was 31, Pierre Poilievre. Or former Bay Street lawyer for Big Pharma and second-generation politician, but guy who promotes himself as an everyday handyman, Aaron O'Toole. And there's something very wrong that Canada's media is doing almost nothing to vet this so-called government in waiting. I mean, you'd think that after the last election, where we were halfway through the campaign before learning that the leader of the opposition and a guy who came really close to being the Prime Minister of Canada was not only half American, but still registered for U.S. Selective Service. After that, you'd think the media would want to look a bit more closely at the people lining up for the job of Government of Canada. But instead, when they actually do write about the Conservatives, it's usually puff pieces on their normalness, which unless the average Canadian spends half their year in Oklahoma wine store parking lots making screeching rant videos about the evil of taxes, none of them are. Either that, or the media gives them a platform for their anti-Trudeau nonsense, where these idiots push every stupid, half-baked mock scandal with the ranting energy of a 9/11 conspiracy lunatic. And going back a moment, I want you to think about Andy Scheer hiding his American citizenship for a bit, because the media really blew it on that one. Andy attacked then-Governor General Michel Jean for being a dual French citizen, and I'm still unclear what concern we should have had for her because of that. But presuming there is one, or was, it's nothing compared to the reality we could have faced in the middle of the aluminum trade dispute with Trump if conservatives had won that election. Particularly if we didn't learn our Prime Minister was half American until after the U.S. President drafted Canada's head of government into U.S. military service. So yeah, Justin is a little smug bastard, but at least he's not a hypocrite. Yeah. You can go now, because, again, I live here. But I am going to need help getting off of this log. I mean, last time I fell back. So let's just see if we can... No, that didn't work either. Okay. Well, Nation, that's all for the Colbert Report this week. Take care, stay safe, and watch out for wildlife on the roads! So you stuck around this long? Why not subscribe, for crying out loud? Or, hey, this is better. Go to that area just below the video where it says share, copy the link, and then share it on like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Why does Grandma have her own social media? Just share it. Just get the word out, man. This is funny stuff. What do I have to do for you people? Like this. Oops.